Hello, my dear students. This lesson is related to biology for class 10th, 9th or 10th. And this lesson is for all biology students who are just getting introduced towards reproduction in animals. So what we are going to do in this lesson, we are going to learn about how many types of reproduction are observed in animals and what are different modes of reproduction in animals, how do animals reproduce. So let's find out what is the definition of reproduction. First, we should know the definition of reproduction. Reproduction is the characteristic of living organisms by this process, they make or give birth or produce young ones of their own kinds. Young ones of their own kind means production of new individuals, new living organisms with the similarity. These can be young ones, and here you can use the term living organisms of their own kind. For example, if we talk about an alligator, alligator will be able to produce alligators. Cats will be able to produce cats. The babies of human beings are humans. So reproduction is the characteristic of living organisms to produce living organisms of their own kind. And reproduction is only possible among same species. Different members cannot reproduce together. So same species, the members of same species are able to reproduce among themselves. Okay. Now the second aspect we are going to learn here is types of reproduction in animals. Okay. As we are going to deal with the topic reproduction in animals. So types of reproduction in animals is it can be described as there are two types of reproduction in animals, that is asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Okay, so these two types of reproduction these two modes of reproduction are observed in animals through which they can reproduce. This A means no. So in asexual reproduction, no sexes are involved. Sexes are not involved in asexual type of reproduction, and there is no need of fusion of gametes of different kinds. Okay, but in sexual reproduction, in this method, two different gametes or two different sexes unite together. Two different sexes are involved. When these sexes unite together, they give rise to an individual of their own kind. Okay. Now let's start with asexual reproduction, the means of asexual reproduction in animals. So when we talk about asexual reproduction in animals, we are understanding that animals are of different kinds. First, we can find out that our animals are microorganisms. There are some microorganisms which are behaving like animals, means they are not phototrophic and they are containing animal-like features. Similarly, animals may include invertebrates and vertebrates. Okay, we are the part of vertebrata, and human beings are included in this vertebrates group. Okay, so microorganisms are not very much advanced and they have a single cell. So when we talk about single-celled organisms, these single-celled organisms usually contain three essential features. Like there is a membrane, which is the outermost covering. It separates the internal environment of the cell from the external environment, the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Okay, so this is a whole structure of microorganisms. So there are very simple means of reproduction among microorganisms. Invertebrates are not very much developed, but they may be multicellular. So microorganisms are single-celled, and they are also called unicellular. So among unicellular animals, we can find that there are different modes of asexual reproduction, and we can also study the modes of reproduction in multicellular. Invertebrates are multicellular organisms. It means multicellular organisms are the organisms containing many cells in their bodies, but their bodies are small and they are not very much developed. Okay, they are less developed in comparison to the vertebrates. When we talk about vertebrates, vertebrates are multicellular, highly advanced and developed bodies. Okay, and these organisms have different systems, specific systems for working for any particular task can be performed by a specific or particular system. Okay, so one system cannot perform the task, any other task which is not for which it is not responsible, right? So here there is a diversity among animals. So let's generally we can find out what are the modes of asexual reproduction in animals. The modes of asexual reproduction in animals involves, number one is binary fission. This mode of reproduction is observed in binary fission. Okay, it means fission means to split up. The meaning of fission is splitting up. When a single cell splits up into two cells, this process is called binary fission. Okay, so binary means two and fission means to split up. So when a single cell splits up into two daughter cells of its own kind, this is called binary fission. This type of fission occurs when an organism is dividing into two organisms, and these organisms are similar or same. So commonly observed in unicellular organisms, like we can see that binary fission is common in protozoa. Protozoa. These are, proto means very primitive, very simpler, zoa means animal. So protozoa are all unicellular, yani single-celled organisms. Okay. And during this process, the nucleus of the parent organism divides into two nuclei. And after the division of nucleus, the cytoplasm will also divide into two parts, and the constriction which appears in cytoplasm deepens from outside to inside. Finally, the whole cell divides into two. Like, for example, this is the cell. The nucleus will split up. It will divide into two. When the nucleus divides into two, then there is a constriction which appears, and when the constriction appears, the cell will eventually divide into two cells. Okay, so this is the process of binary fission. If we talk about fission, fission is fission can be binary, in which two cells are formed, and fission can be multiple fission. Fission is of two types. So in multiple fission, we observe that the cell splits up into many smaller cells or fragments, and this is called multiple fission. This involves the division of organism into many smaller sized daughter organisms. Like, for example, we can say Plasmodium. Plasmodium reproduces by multiple fission. Plasmodium is the malarial parasite which are found in humans as well as mosquitoes. Okay, so Plasmodium is a unicellular organism. It is included in phylum Protozoa, and it reproduces with multiple fission. The second mode of asexual reproduction in animals is budding. What is budding? Budding is observed in yeast cells as well. We can observe budding in yeast cells. Yeast is a fungus, unicellular fungus. What happens? There grows an outgrowth on the outer side of the cell, and on this outgrowth, in this outgrowth, the ability to grow into a new organism is hidden. When this bud is fallen down, it will produce into a new yeast cell. Similarly, we can observe budding in different organisms like Hydra. Budding can also be involved in Hydra. So in this method, one or more outgrowths develop on the body surface of the organisms, and these outgrowths are called buds, right? These buds have their abilities to separate from the parent body, and they can start living independently and develop into a new organism. Hydra is most common example among multicellular organisms. Okay, and yeast cells are the examples of budding. They reproduce by budding among unicellular organisms, and this unicellular organism is a fungus. Okay, now the next method, the third method of asexual reproduction in animals can be fragmentation. What is fragmentation? Fragmentation is the process of asexual reproduction in which we observe that living organism divides into fragments. Fragmentation means division into fragments. So when a living organism divides into fragments, it means that there is a whole individual and it divides into fragments, and each fragment will develop into a new organism. So this type of asexual reproduction occurs in lower multicellular animals like liver fluke. Liver fluke is a parasite of intestine, and nematodes, the worms. Nematodes also develop and reproduce through fragmentation. Each fragment recovers its lost part by regeneration and develops into a new organism. So how do these fragments develop into new organisms? By regeneration. Regenerative properties help them to grow the rest of the filament. So all filamentous organisms, filamentous long-bodied organisms are actually able to reproduce through fragmentation. Okay, these are the common methods of asexual reproduction among animals. Now, when we talk about sexual reproduction among animals, that will take a separate lesson. So I'm closing it up here. Thank you so much for staying with me.